The smell of failure is the ozone burn of 1,000 overloaded electronics and the bitter taste of cold coffee from 4 hours ago. Right now, I'm standing on the stage of the Catalyst Summit. Down there are 5,000 people, the most brilliant minds in Silicon Valley, investors who can decide the fate of a nation with a single nod. Reminiscing, on the giant screen behind me is the logo of Aura Dynamics, the $50 billion empire I poured my blood, sweat, and soul into building. Disappointed. This should have been the most glorious moment of my life. I should have been a king standing on top of the world. But I'm not a king. Defeated. I'm a prisoner. A prisoner of the very legacy I created. My heart is pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, not from excitement, but from sheer terror. My throat is dry, my palms are slick with sweat, because I know in just a few minutes it will all be over. Terrified. Everything. I see him, the man I once called my mentor, my right hand smiling in the shadows. He thinks he's won. He thinks this chess game is a checkmate, and he's right. Almost. But what he doesn't know is that in that crowd, a ghost from my past has just returned. And next to her is a 7-year-old girl with eyes as blue as my own. A secret I had unknowingly buried. A truth that could either destroy me or save me. They say success has its price. I used to think that price was sleepless nights, broken relationships, the loneliness at the top. But I was wrong. The real price is much, much higher. It's paid with lies, with betrayal, and with the future of an innocent child. This video isn't a story about how to build a tech company. It's the story of how I destroyed it from the inside without even knowing. This is the journey of uncovering a spectacular deception, a conspiracy that was planned for years to take everything that was mine. Do you want to know how a $50 billion empire was nearly annihilated by a secret buried for 7 years? Do you want to see the breathtaking game of wits between me, the traitor, and the one woman who holds the key to toppling it all? Then don't go anywhere. Buckle up.
To understand the storm that was about to hit my life on that fateful day on stage, we have to go back in time. Back 3 weeks to a dreary Tuesday afternoon, typical of Seattle. My world, back then, was a fortress. A fortress of glass and steel perched on the highest floor of the Aura Tower, looking down on the city like a god observing his own chessboard. Everything in this penthouse operated in perfect order, controlled by my voice and an artificial intelligence system named Juno. Not a single speck of dust was out of place. Not a single sound was superfluous. It was the silence of power, of absolute control. At that moment, I was chairing a virtual board meeting with tense faces from Tokyo, London, and Berlin appearing on the smart glass wall. We were discussing the acquisition of a European competitor, a 9-figure deal. Every word I spoke could shift the balance of power in an entire industry. And then, that perfection was broken. "Sir Vance," Juno's electronic voice chimed, neutral yet carrying an unusual urgency. "There is a security alert at the main gate of the private residence. Level unclassified." I frowned, annoyance rising in my chest. "A disruption." I hated disruptions. "Juno, have head of security Carter handle it. I'm busy." "Understood, sir. However, the subject is a child. Alone." I paused for a second. A child? At the security gate of one of the most heavily guarded buildings in Seattle? Ridiculous. It must be the lost child of some guest. "Tell them to find her parents and send her away. I don't have time for trivial matters." The meeting continued, but my focus had been compromised. 10 minutes later, Juno spoke again, this time patching Carter's voice directly through. "Sir Vance, apologies for the intrusion, but the child refuses to leave. She insists on seeing you." My annoyance turned into a cold rage. Who dared to waste my time like this? Carter, I don't know any child. Remove her. We've tried, sir, but she said something, and I thought you should hear it. She said, "My mom said this was the last hope." Last hope. Those two words were like a key, suddenly unlocking a door of curiosity in my fortress of logic. It was no longer a nuisance. It had become an anomaly, and I, Elias Vance, live to solve anomalies. "Send her up," I commanded, ignoring the surprised looks from my board members. "Give her 5 minutes." When the private elevator doors opened, I was prepared for anything. But not for this. A small girl, with messy dark brown hair tied in a crooked ponytail, wearing a worn-out jacket, clutching a tattered teddy bear. But it wasn't her clothes or her appearance that stunned me into silence. It was her eyes. Deep blue eyes, the color of a Seattle sky after the rain. A color I see every morning in the mirror. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. The girl stepped in, unafraid of the cold luxury, and looked directly at me. "Are you Elias Vance?" Her voice was clear and resolute. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "I am. Who are you?" "I'm Maya," she said. "My mom is Dr. Eris Thorne Eris." The name was like a lightning strike to my memory. Eris, the brilliant data scientist, the smartest, strongest, most stubborn woman I had ever known. The woman who was once a part of my world, before that world became nothing but work and numbers. My heart skipped a beat. "Your mother, why did she send you here?" Maya took a deep breath, her small shoulders squaring as if she were carrying the world. She took another step forward, and her next words shattered the silence in my fortress forever, permanently altering the trajectory of my life. "Dad." The word rang out, alien and jarring in this space. "Dad canceled Mom's project. Now we don't have money for my medicine." Time stopped. All sound vanished. The smart glass wall with its powerful faces became a blur. There was only me and the little girl with my eyes, standing there, accusing me with a truth so terrible and so painfully simple. The word "dad," the word "medicine." Those two words didn't belong in my world. They belonged to another reality, a reality of vulnerability and care, a reality I had turned my back on long ago, and in that moment the king of the tech world ceased to exist. Dad. The word hung in the air, a foreign, sharp-edged entity. It didn't dissipate. It took root in my mind, piercing through the layers of logic, of skepticism, of the pride I had spent a decade building. My first reaction wasn't emotional, it was analytical. A scam, right? It had to be. A sophisticated play designed to attack a weakness no one thought I possessed. People had tried everything to take me down, attacking my stock, spreading rumors, poaching talent. But using a child? This was a new level of play. I looked down at Maya. She just stood there, unwavering, her clear blue eyes holding no trace of deceit. If this was an act, she was the best damn actor in the world. Those eyes. They were a perfect copy of mine, an undeniable genetic truth, a biological signature that no technology could fake. My reason screamed that this was a trap, but a deep, primal part of me, a part I had long tried to bury, was trembling with recognition. "Juno," I said, my voice hoarse, foreign to myself. I turned my back on Maya, unable to look into those eyes any longer. "Terminate the meeting." "Sir, the call with Berlin—" "Terminate it!" I roared. For the first time in years, I had lost control. On the glass wall, the powerful faces looked stunned before winking out one by one, leaving only the reflection of a man standing on a precipice. The silence returned, heavy as lead. "Juno," I continued, my voice calmer now, colder. "Pull all files related to Dr. Eris Thorne. Employment history, projects, reason for resignation, everything. The cool blue light of data files materialized in the air. Lines of text and numbers scrolled past my eyes. Eris Thorne joined Aura Dynamics 8 years ago. A prodigious talent, head of Project Chiron, a pioneering AI system for diagnosing rare pediatric heart conditions. I remembered that project. I had greenlit it myself, impressed by Eris's passion and intellect. And then I saw it. Project status: terminated. Reason: budget overruns, uncertain efficacy. A generic reason, a perfect excuse to shut something down without much explanation. And the final approver on that decision was Marcus Sterling, my COO, based on a report I had only skimmed. My heart hammered. Date of project termination: September 27th, 7 years and 9 months ago. Date Eris Thorne submitted her resignation: September 28th, 7 years and 9 months ago. 7 years and 9 months. A simple, cold calculation ran through my brain. A pregnancy. The timeline was a perfect match. A chill ran down my spine. This was no longer speculation. This was a credible possibility, but I needed more. I needed absolute certainty. "Juno," I commanded, and the order felt vile even to me. "Engage top-level priority access. Find the medical records for a child named Maya Thorne, born in Seattle within the last 7 years." It was a gross invasion of privacy, an ethical line I crossed without a moment's hesitation. Seconds later, an encrypted file appeared. A medical chart from Seattle Children's Hospital. Maya Thorne, age 7. And then I saw the diagnosis: arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy. A rare inherited heart condition caused by a faulty gene. A condition that Eris's Project Chiron had been created to fight. Everything shattered. There are no coincidences. Only pieces of a picture I had been too blind to see. Eris didn't leave me because of work. She left because she was carrying a piece of me, and she knew that I, Elias Vance, the perfection-obsessed man who tolerated no distractions, would have seen it as a liability. I had unknowingly canceled the very project that could have saved her daughter, our daughter. I slowly turned back. Maya was still there, impossibly patient. She wasn't crying or demanding. She was just standing there, a quiet judgment. My fortress had fallen. The powerful silence was now a gaping void. For the first time in my life, I was facing a problem that money, power, and logic couldn't instantly solve. But instinctively I fell back on the only tool I knew. I had to fix this. I had to fix my mistake. I walked toward Maya, dropping to one knee to meet her gaze, an action alien to a body used to commanding from on high. "Maya," I said, my voice trembling, "Dad will take care of everything. Take me to your mother." I didn't know that my first decision as a father would be another catastrophic mistake. I was going not to listen but to solve. The self-driving car glided in silence, a black, glossy whale in Seattle's stream of traffic. Inside, the space was perfectly soundproofed, the temperature precisely controlled. This was another one of my micro-worlds, a mobile fortress where everything was under my control. But today, that control was an illusion. In the back seat, Maya showed no awe at the leather and carbon fiber interior. She wasn't like other children. Instead of wonder, she observed quietly, her deep blue eyes reflecting the skyscrapers we left behind. It was as if she were analyzing my world, just as I was trying to analyze her sudden existence in mine. The car left the glittering financial district, where tech-named towers rose like proud spires. We headed north to Fremont, an older, more intimate neighborhood. Here, old brick buildings stood next to local shops and cafes that smelled of roasted beans and real life. The air here was different. It was warmer, messier, and more human. This was Eris's world. A world whose existence I had almost forgotten. The car stopped in front of a 3-story apartment building, its paint slightly faded with flower pots hanging from the balconies. It was clean, cozy, but a million miles away from my glass tower. I took a deep breath, feeling like an astronaut about to step onto a foreign planet. I followed Maya up the stairs, the hallway smelling of sautéed garlic and old books. Every step on the old wooden floor seemed to echo the years I had missed. Maya stopped in front of apartment 2B and knocked. A familiar wooden door, not a titanium alloy slab that opened with a retinal scan. My heart, which remained calm during billion-dollar deals, was now pounding erratically. The door opened, and Aris was standing there. Time had changed her. The brilliant blonde hair I remembered was now tied up in a neat bun, a few strands of silver glittering under the hallway light. She wore a simple sweater and jeans. She still had those intelligent green eyes, the ones that used to challenge my assumptions in meetings, the ones that used to look at me with affection late at night in the office. But now, those eyes also held the fine lines of worry and a hardness that wasn't there before. She saw me, and for a fleeting moment the world stood still. Surprise, shock, and then, instantly, a defensive wall went up. "Maya," her voice was sharp, her gaze ignoring me and focusing on her daughter. "I told you to go to Aunt Sarah's house." "But Mommy, the medicine," Maya began. "Inside, Maya," Aris commanded, her tone allowing no argument. Only when Maya had slipped inside did Aris turn to me. The wall of ice was now complete. "What do you want here, Elias?" I had prepared for anger, for accusations, but her coldness was harder to counter. I decided to get straight to the point, the only way I knew how. "Aris, I know. About Maya, about her condition." I saw a flicker of hurt in her eyes before it was masked. "You don't have to worry," I continued, confident I was offering an irrefutable solution. I pulled out my smartphone, opening a private banking app. "I'll have her moved to the best hospital in Switzerland, the world's top specialists, all expenses covered, everything." I expected relief, maybe even a little gratitude. Instead, I saw something I had never seen in Aris before. Absolute contempt. She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Switzerland? Top specialists? You think the problem is money, Elias?" She stepped closer, and for the first time, I took a step back. 7 years, she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "For 7 years I have been researching every medical journal, finding every doctor, holding my daughter in my arms through every arrhythmia. For 7 years I have used my brain, the one you used to admire, to fight for every single day of her life. And now you think you can show up with your digital checkbook and be the savior?" She looked me dead in the eye. "I don't need your money. I never did. And she doesn't need a sponsor. She needed a father. But that man disappeared 7 years ago." With that, she slammed the door in my face. The thud of the wooden door echoed in the quiet hallway, but to me it was louder than a stock market crash. I stood there, alone, the expensive phone in my hand suddenly feeling useless and absurd. For the first time in his life, Elias Vance, the man who could buy the world, was completely bankrupt. I had brought my most powerful weapon, and it had been utterly rejected. Because I had realized a bitter truth. The problem wasn't what I had. The problem was who I was, and that was something money couldn't fix. I sat motionless in my mobile fortress, watching raindrops streak down the window pane. They looked like tears. The simple wooden door of apartment 2B, with its old paint, was more formidable than any firewall I had ever designed, any defense system I had ever built. It had stopped me, Elias Vance, along with all my power and wealth, easily and absolutely. Eris's rejection didn't just hurt me. It sobered me. I had approached this problem like a system error that needed to be patched with money. But this wasn't a system error. This was a deep wound, one that had been festering for 7 years. And I realized I didn't even know the true cause of that wound. Why was Project Chiron canceled? The question returned, haunting me. Budget overruns, uncertain efficacy. That was the official explanation, an answer I had previously accepted without question. But now, knowing my own daughter's life might have depended on it, that explanation sounded hollow and despicable. I couldn't go back to Oris with questions. I had to go back with answers. I had to understand my enemy, what or who it was. As soon as I returned to the penthouse, I turned it into my command center. The confusion and hurt were compressed, making way for something more familiar. Hyper-focus. I was a hunter in a digital world, and tonight I was going hunting. I commanded Juno, retrieve all financial reports and internal emails from the R&D department for Q3 and Q4, 7 years ago. Focus on terminated projects or those with reallocated budgets. Thousands of lines of data materialized, a matrix of numbers and words. I scanned through them at a speed no normal human could follow. And then I found it. A thread. Project Chiron's initial budget had been cut by 30% just 1 month before the final report was due. The money hadn't disappeared. It had been moved into a vague, strategic reserve fund, a financial black hole few would dare to question. The person who signed off on that transfer was a finance manager under Marcus Sterling. The first thread. Next, I analyzed the emails. I searched for keywords. Chiron, Eris Thorn, ROI. I found an email chain between that finance manager and Marcus's office. There was no direct order. Marcus was too smart for that. Instead, there were heavily weighted suggestions. We need to focus on projects with immediate profitability. Let's take a hard look at the costs of blue sky projects like Chiron. Mr. Vance demands maximum efficiency. He had used my name, my authority, as an invisible weapon of pressure. He had turned me into the villain of my own story without my knowledge. But why? What was the motive? Killing a promising project just to save costs wasn't Marcus's style. He always thought bigger. And that's when I realized I had been looking in the wrong place. The problem wasn't entirely inside Aura Dynamics. I opened another analysis window, one I use to track competitors. I ordered Juno to run a cross-referencing algorithm, searching for any unusual transactions between Aura's senior staff and major pharmaceutical corporations worldwide in the 6 months after Project Chiron was terminated. The system ran in silence, and then a single result appeared. A single red dot on the world map. The Cayman Islands. A shell company named Kestrel Innovations had received a $50 million payment from a subsidiary of the pharmaceutical giant PharmaLife. The sole registered director of Kestrel Innovations was a lawyer, but as I dug deeper, following the digital trail, I found the ultimate beneficiary. Marcus Sterling. My world shattered again, but this time not from shock, but from a cold, crystalline rage. It was all there, clear as a solved equation. Marcus hadn't killed Project Chiron. He had stolen it. He had seen its potential, a potential worth billions. He deliberately sabotaged it from within, ensuring Aris, the one scientist who could complete it, would resign in frustration. Then, he sold her core data, her research foundation, to a competitor for a massive payday. He had betrayed the company. He had betrayed me. And in the process, he had stolen my daughter's future. I stood up, looking out at the city of Seattle sleeping under the rain. Its lights no longer twinkled. They looked like watching eyes. The game had changed. This was no longer about fixing a past mistake. This was a war for my daughter, for Eris, and for the soul of the company I had created, and Marcus Sterling had just started it. My next move was clear. To fight this monster, I needed an ally as smart as him, more determined than him, and with every reason to hate him as much as I did. I needed Eris. But this time, I wouldn't be coming with a checkbook. I would be coming with the truth. The rage didn't blind me. On the contrary, it made everything sharply, brutally clear. Marcus Sterling had built a fortress of lies around himself. To breach it, I couldn't use brute force. I couldn't simply call a board meeting and make accusations. Marcus had been with the company too long. He had too many allies, too many loyalists. He would deny, distort, and use the story of Eris and Maya to paint me as unhinged, obsessed with an old flame. No, to take down Marcus, I needed a weapon he couldn't counter. I needed the raw, irrefutable truth. And that weapon was held by only one person: Eris. But after my humiliating failure at her door, I knew I couldn't return empty-handed. I couldn't just show up with data files and an accusation. That was still my world, not hers. I needed a key, a gesture to prove that I understood, that I was coming not as the CEO of Aura Dynamics, but as Elias. I spent the next 2 hours not looking for more evidence against Marcus, but searching for 2 items. The first was a book, Recursive Data Structures and Chaos Theory, a rare academic text from the 90s, long out of print. I remembered Eris mentioning it during one of our passionate debates about AI, calling it the Bible of the field. I had to use a network of antiquarian book collectors in Europe to find the last remaining copy. This wasn't an expensive gift. It was a message. I still remember. The second item was for Maya. I didn't buy a doll or a tablet. Instead, I found a complex robotics kit, the kind that could be programmed with simple commands. It was a gift not just for entertainment, but for challenge, to spark curiosity. It was another message. I see your intelligence. With those 2 items, I drove back to Fremont. This time, I didn't feel like an astronaut. I felt like a soldier going into battle carrying an olive branch. When I knocked on apartment 2B for the second time, the silence lasted longer. Finally, the door creaked open. It was Eris, her eyes still defensive. You again. I thought I made myself clear. Eris, please, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just 5 minutes, please. This isn't about money. It's about the truth. Perhaps it was the word truth that made her hesitate. She looked me up and down, as if searching for a trap. Finally, she sighed and stepped back, opening the door for me. Inside, the apartment was small but tidy. Books were everywhere. On the walls were colorful children's drawings. It smelled like life. Compared to my sterile penthouse, this place felt more like a home. Maya was sitting on the floor, assembling a Lego model. She looked up at me, her blue eyes wary. I didn't say anything about Marcus. Instead, I handed the book to Eris. I found it, I said softly. I remembered you talking about it. Eris stared at the book, her hand trembling slightly as she touched the worn cover. For a moment, her wall of ice seemed to thaw a little. Then I knelt down and gave the robotics kit to Maya. This might be a little hard, I said, but I think you're smart enough to figure it out. Only then did I take out my tablet. Eris, the reason I'm here is because I was wrong. You were right. I tried to solve the problem with money because that's all I knew, but the real problem wasn't what I did. It's what was done to us. I placed the tablet on the table, displaying the flowchart of money, the encrypted emails, and finally, the structure of the Cayman Shell Company. I explained everything, not as a CEO, but as a colleague, an analyst presenting his findings to the one person in the world who could understand its complexity. Eris listened, her eyes glued to the screen. At first, there was skepticism. Then, as the evidence connected, I saw recognition dawn in her eyes. She remembered the strange meetings, the nonsensical budget refusals, Marcus's condescending attitude. The anger in her eyes flared again, but this time, it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at Marcus. "That bastard," she whispered, her voice filled with venom. "He didn't just kill it. He stole it. He stole my life's work." "Yes," I said. "And he used me as a shield. He played both of us." Eris was silent for a long moment. Finally, she looked up, and I saw a new fire in her eyes, the fire of a warrior. "You have proof of the money trail, but you don't have proof of the technology itself. He'll say they were just preliminary ideas, and that his company developed them independently." She stood up, walked to a bookshelf, and pulled out an old hard drive wrapped in an anti-static bag. "He's wrong," she said, placing the drive on the table between us. "I have everything. The entire original source code, every experiment, every development note, all encrypted and time-stamped. A backup I made the night before I resigned. I always had a feeling something wasn't right." I looked at the small hard drive. It wasn't just data. It was our silver bullet. "So what do we do?" I asked. Eris looked at me, and for the first time in 7 years, I didn't see anger or hurt. I saw an ally. "We don't do anything," she said, a sharp, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "We take back what's ours." Two brilliant minds, once separated by pride and misunderstanding, were now united. And they had a single target: Marcus Sterling. Eris's apartment became a command center, a makeshift war room. The cold luxury of my office was replaced by her warmth and creative chaos. My laptop, a machine worth tens of thousands of dollars, sat next to her older model on the wooden dining table. Complex diagrams were hand-drawn on a whiteboard, interspersed with Maya's colorful drawings. We worked relentlessly for 2 straight days, fueled by coffee and a shared purpose. It was an intellectual dance I hadn't experienced in a very long time. I mapped out strategy, analyzed the board's weaknesses, and predicted Marcus's legal moves. Eris, in turn, was a true sorceress. She dissected every line of code from her backup, finding undeniable digital signatures to prove her authorship. She even found a backdoor, a security vulnerability, that she had built into Aura Dynamics' network years ago, a secret entrance only she knew. In the rare moments of rest, I watched Aris and Maya. I saw how Aris patiently explained a scientific concept to her daughter, how Maya listened with a bright intelligence in her blue eyes. Once, Maya brought me a glass of water, looked at me and asked, "Are you tired, Daddy?" A simple question, but it struck me to the core, a constant reminder of what was at stake. I wasn't just fighting for my company. I was fighting for the right to hear that question every day. We had a plan, a careful one. We would approach Ilara Vance, a veteran board member, and my aunt, the only person I could truly trust. We would present all the evidence to her privately, so she could convene a secret internal investigation. It was a safe plan. Logical. But Marcus Sterling was no amateur. He knew I wouldn't sit idle, and he struck first. It happened on the 3rd morning. Eris's phone buzzed incessantly. A friend had sent her a link. It was an article from Silicon Pulse, a tech blog with millions of readers. I will never forget the headline. It was designed to destroy. Aura Dynamics CEO Elias Vance accused of harassing former employee after she attempts to extort him with a child. The air was sucked out of the room. I read the article, every word a hammer blow to the chest. The piece, quoting close sources, undoubtedly fed by Marcus, painted a vicious and cunning narrative. It told the story of a disgruntled and unstable scientist, Aris, who was fired for poor performance. Years later, she returned, using a child to try and extort her former CEO, me. When she was rejected, she began a campaign of harassment and slander. He had beaten us to the punch. He didn't just deny, he launched a preemptive strike. He had turned Eris from a victim into a villain, and me into either a gullible fool or a harasser. He had poisoned the well before we could even draw water. "It's over," Aris whispered, her face pale. "Our plan. No one on the board will listen to us now. They'll think this is a personal vendetta." She was right. Marcus had closed every door. Every safe path was blocked. We were cornered, our reputations shredded, with nowhere left to go. Despair began to creep into the room. I looked at Aris's devastated face, then at the tablet still displaying the venomous article. And then I saw it. In the article, there was a detail. Marcus, through a spokesperson, had expressed his regret and said he would not let these baseless slanders affect the upcoming major event, his keynote presentation at the Catalyst Summit, where he would announce a revolutionary medical AI technology. His biggest stage, his moment of coronation. "No," I said, and my voice was filled with a cold determination. "He didn't close every door. He just opened the last one for us." Eris looked up at me, confusion in her eyes. "He wants a public stage?" I continued, a crazy and daring plan beginning to form. "Fine. We'll give him a public stage. He won't be able to hide in a closed boardroom. He'll have to face the truth in front of thousands of people, broadcast live to the entire world." Eris understood. The despair in her eyes was replaced by a reckless spark. "The back door, the security back door I built," she said. "It's still there. I can get into the main stage's presentation system." The safe plan was dead. There was only one plan left. An all-or-nothing plan. A final gamble where we would bet everything. Our careers, our reputations, and our futures. The stage had been set, not by us, but by our enemy, and we were going to turn his coronation into a public execution. The Seattle Convention Center was like a massive, hyperactive beehive. The Catalyst Summit was Aura Dynamics' most important event of the year, a showcase of power and vision. The Aura logo was everywhere, on giant screens, on the lanyards of thousands of attendees. The air was thick with the manufactured optimism of the tech world, a world where I had once been king. But today, I wasn't a king. I was a ghost, moving through the backstage corridors, my heart hammering against my ribs like a war drum. I wore a simple suit, not as a CEO, but as a normal attendee. But in my pocket was a wireless microphone, and in my head was a plan that could cost me everything. In the crowd, tucked away in a corner, Aris sat at her laptop, the screen dimmed to its lowest setting. Beside her, Maya, in her prettiest dress, was coloring in a book, completely unaware that she was at the epicenter of a pending earthquake. Aris looked calm, but I could see her fingers flying across the keyboard with a lethal, focused tension. She was my sniper, my digital commando waiting for the signal. And then, the moment came. The stage lights dimmed. The crowd fell silent. A slick introductory video played, praising a future without disease, a revolution in medicine. And then, from the darkness, Marcus Sterling emerged. He was in his element, confident, charismatic, with $1 million smile. He waved to the roaring crowd. He was a corporate rock star, and this was his biggest show. "Thank you," he began, his voice booming through the hall. "Today we're not just going to talk about the future, we are going to shape it. For years, Aura Dynamics has dreamed of a day when artificial intelligence could solve humanity's biggest problems, and today, that dream becomes a reality." I stood in the wings, watching him pontificate, and a wave of revulsion washed over me. He was speaking Aris's ideas, her passion, in the empty words of a salesman. "I am proud to introduce to you," Marcus said, his voice full of drama, "Project Chimera, an AI system capable of diagnosing terminal illnesses at their earliest stages with unprecedented accuracy." That was it. I stepped out of the shadows, standing at the edge of the stage, just visible enough for Aris to see me. It was our signal. In the crowd, I saw Aris give a subtle nod. Her fingers began to dance across the keyboard. On stage, Marcus was preparing for his most important presentation slide. "And here is the brain behind Chimera." But the giant screen behind him suddenly flickered. Once. Twice. His slick 3D graphics distorted, glitching like an old TV set. Marcus paused, a flicker of confusion crossing his perfect face. "Ah, it seems we're having a slight technical difficulty," he chuckled, trying to save the moment. The crowd began to murmur. And then, the screen went black. The whole auditorium held its breath. A second later, it lit up again. But it wasn't the Aura logo or Chimera's graphics. On the screen was a simple text document. The headline, "Project Proposal Chiron, Submitter, Dr. Aris Thorne." And below it, the timestamp, frozen forever in time. Date, August 2nd, 7 years ago. The entire hall fell silent. Marcus spun around, stared at the screen, and I saw all the color drain from his face. He understood. That's when I walked out. I calmly strode forward, took the microphone from the lectern, ignoring Marcus's horrified gaze. I stood center stage, under the lights, and looked directly at the crowd. "Good evening," I said, and my voice, amplified by the sound system, was clear and strong. "What you are seeing on the screen is not a technical glitch. It's the truth." I pointed at Marcus, who was frozen to the spot. "This man has told you about a revolution, but he forgot to mention the most important part. This is not his revolution." I turned back to the crowd, searching for Aris's eyes. The brilliant mind behind this technology, the person who poured every ounce of her sweat and intellect into it, is sitting right down there. Her name is Dr. Aris Thorne. The murmurs turned into a shockwave. "This project," I continued, my voice turning to ice, "was deliberately terminated by Mr. Marcus Sterling himself 7 years ago. Its data was stolen, and it was sold to a competitor for personal profit. Financial records don't lie." On the screen, Aris, with the precision of an assassin, replaced the old document with the money flow charts, the statements from the Cayman Shell Company. Irrefutable proof. "But that's not the worst of it," I said, delivering the final blow. "The reason Dr. Thorne created this project wasn't just for work. It was her hope to find a cure for her own daughter, a little girl who is fighting a rare heart condition." I took a breath, letting the weight of the sentence sink into every corner of the auditorium. "And that little girl is also my daughter." The world exploded. Shouts, a storm of camera flashes. Marcus staggered back as if he'd been physically struck. Stage security began moving toward him. And there, under the spotlight, in front of thousands of eyes, the empire of lies that Marcus Sterling had built came crashing down. The storm broke right there on the stage. The flashes of 100 cameras turned the auditorium into a lightning-filled sky. Marcus Sterling, who just a minute ago had been a king, now looked small and pathetic as he was escorted away by security, his weak protests swallowed by the roar of the crowd. I stood there, in the eye of the hurricane, but for the first time in weeks, my mind was completely still. My mission on the stage was over. Now it was time for a more important one. I didn't answer any questions from the swarming reporters. I didn't look towards the stunned board of directors. I had only one destination. I walked off the stage, through the chaotic crowd, and went straight to the corner of the room where Eris and Maya were being shielded by my security team. Eris looked up at me. In her green eyes, I saw no victorious gloating. I saw relief, a heavy, weighted relief, as if a burden she had carried for 7 years had finally been set down. I said nothing. I just held out my hand, and she took it. Her hand was cold, but her grip was firm. Then I knelt down in front of Maya, my little girl, who had started it all with her incredible courage. Her tense expression was gone. Instead, she looked at me, tilted her head, and then unexpectedly threw her arms around my neck. The hug of a child, pure and without agenda, was more powerful than any billion-dollar contract. In that moment, amidst the roar of the world, our family found its first moment of peace. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media coverage, but this time we were not the victims of the story. We were its authors. The headlines were no longer about gold diggers or deadbeat dads. Instead, they read, "A Mother's Crusade, Dr. Eris Thorne exposes conspiracy at Aura Dynamics," and "Elias Vance, Atonement and the Fight for a Daughter." Marcus Sterling and his accomplices faced a battery of charges for fraud, industrial espionage, and conspiracy. His small empire crumbled. Back at Aura Dynamics, I called an emergency board meeting, but I didn't go there to consolidate power. I went there to give it up. I officially resigned as Chief Executive Officer. In my place, I announced the formation of a completely new branch of the company, the Thorne Vance Legacy Fund. All profits from the patents of the Old Chiron project, along with a $10 billion investment from my personal fortune, would be used to fund research and provide free treatment for rare pediatric heart conditions for children around the world. And the head of the fund's research division would be none other than Dr. Eris Thorne. She had gotten her life's work back, not just as a scientist, but as its leader. 6 months later. The scene isn't a glamorous boardroom or a glittering stage. It's a quiet lab at the Thorne Vance Fund. The afternoon Seattle sun streams through the window, illuminating the state-of-the-art equipment. On the main monitor, a 3D model of a heart beats with a steady, healthy rhythm. It's the result of Maya's latest heart scan. "Look, Daddy," Maya points at the screen, her voice full of pride. "The doctor said my heart is even stronger than yours now." I laugh and ruffle her hair. Eris stands beside me, slipping her arm gently through mine. Her smile holds no tension, only peace and happiness. We did it. We hadn't just exposed a villain. We had transformed our pain and betrayal into something good, something that could save countless others. That night, after reading Maya a story, Aris and I stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Giving up the CEO title? Giving up that power?" I looked into her eyes, the eyes I had loved for so long. "Aris," I said, "I spent my whole life building a legacy out of skyscrapers, stock values, and lines of code. I thought that was how my name would last forever. But I was wrong." I took her hand. "A true legacy isn't in the inanimate things we leave behind. It's in the lives we touch, the wounds we heal, the people we lift up while we're still here. It took me 7 years to learn that lesson." I glanced toward Maya's room, where a soft nightlight was glowing. A legacy isn't measured in market caps. It's measured in the beat of a tiny, healthy heart. And that is a legacy worth fighting for.